Primetime continues. Now, Chris Cuomo.
Our primetime investigation of cruise ship crime began months ago when we first looked at the troubling unsolved disappearances on cruises. Now we've identified another criminal threat that many are unaware of: sexual assaults on board ship. And like the disappearances, it's not simply how often they occur, but how the cruise lines react when they do. Are women made to feel like victims a second time by the very cruise ship personnel that should be helping them? Sharing what it's like to be the victim of sexual assault is difficult enough, let alone to discuss it in front of Congress. But these women came forward because they want people to know what happened to them on board a cruise ship.
On the last night of the cruise, I was drugged by a bartender employed by the cruise line and sexually assaulted.
Being raped is an enormous hurt in her whole being that could never begin to heal.
Our primetime investigation took us into the realm of sex assaults at sea. We found case after case filed by Jane Doe, anonymous victims. Almost all of them settled under terms of confidentiality. Critics say this is one tactic the cruise industry uses to keep crime out of the spotlight.
I believe there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of victims that have never come forward. I believe that with my whole soul.
That's why I'm here. I want them to come forward.
Marilyn Decker's daughter, Jamie, refused to become another Jane Doe and let the cruise line industry silence her. Jamie is now 19 years old. She grew up in the peaceful surroundings of Anchorage, Alaska. And several years ago, her parents capped off a cross-country trip with a week-long vacation on the Carnival cruise ship Sensation.
So we all felt like we were all about to have a really wonderful vacation.
Jamie was excited to be on her first cruise and signed up for the teen activity group.
I was 12, but I didn't want to hang out with the little kids, really, and I was just kind of at the age where I wanted to be older and hang out with older kids.
On the fifth day, the cruise ship was going to be pulling into port at Cozumel, Mexico. Jamie joined the teen group for a swim and was looking forward to a ping pong tournament after lunch.
I got out of the pool. People were scattering. They were going to take showers. They were going to go meet their mom and go eat lunch.
And Jamie was heading back to her cabin, she says, when a man approached her.
He had a tag on with the logo of the cruise on it. He had his name on it. I mean, he was a crew member.
So he comes up to you, and what does he say?
Well, at first he just got in the elevator, and he asked me if I was having fun and if everything was okay. And then he asked me if I wanted to go see where the dolphins played, where the crew members got to go see where the dolphins played. And that's where it all kind of started.
At the time, she simply thought the crew member was offering her a special treat.
First of all, I was 12. I loved dolphins. And second of all, I was going to get to go to a place where nobody else could go. So I was special.
She says the crew member then gave her directions to meet him in a remote area of the ship. He showed up moments after she arrived.
And then he led me into this room. And he showed me the porthole where the dolphins played.
Then, she says, he started to make her uncomfortable.
And he says, oh, you have strong shoulders and a strong back. I didn't know how to react. I was kind of freaked out. I'd never had a man come on to me before, and I certainly didn't know how to handle it, especially an older
man.
At this point, I'd never even kissed a boy. It didn't even cross my mind that he was planning to rape me.
But that was exactly his plan. Instead of being in the arms of her father, the 12-year-old was now in the clutches of a crew member.
He made sure that he was between me and the door at all times. There was never one point when I could have even wanted to run from him. And at that point, he started to touch me and to kiss me, and I started screaming and fighting. And then I think he just got fed up with me fighting, and he took my dress off to lay down. I stopped fighting him. I stopped screaming. It was funny to him. Nobody could hear me, and he knew it. Nobody was looking for me, and he knew it. He could do whatever he wanted, and nobody would know.
There on that cold steel floor, Jamie says the crew member raped her.
I remember it was silent tears at this point. It was where I had nothing left to scream. I had nothing left to really give. It was just, I had no facial expression. It was just blank stare.
After the assault, he finished with a threat.
He told me that if I were to ever tell anybody, that A, he would kill me and then go after my family.
And you believed him?
Oh, I believed him. I still believe him.
How were you able to pick yourself up off that floor?
I'm not even sure to this day. I didn't want my mom to find me like that. At this point, I knew I couldn't tell anybody. I started to tell myself, this hadn't happened. This isn't really as bad as it looks. Then I walked to my cabin and threw my bathing suit and my dress just overboard. It was gone.
Jamie tried to pull herself together and return to the teen group, but she couldn't hide her distress and quickly broke down, crying hysterically. She was brought to security. What did you tell them happened?
I told them that a man had approached me and in the elevator and had taken me to a room and had touched me inappropriately. I didn't tell him sexually inappropriately. And they just thought that I was freaking out because I was scared.
Did they believe you?
No, they said I was lying. They said I was making it up.
Critics say that is typical behavior. The cruise line trying to downplay an incident so that it doesn't get investigated and then reported as a crime. The 12-year-old was shivering with fear and says she was about to become a victim all over again.
They said to my parents, I have a very vivid imagination.
Somebody said, well, show us where she was, almost like, well, she can't possibly do that, so let's just give her a little rope to hang herself.
Next, Jamie is led to a lineup of crew members who might have committed the crime.
The head of security said to me, whichever man you choose, you will ruin the rest of his life.
How will it all play out when Primetime continues? Primetime. Here's Chris Cuomo.
When crime strikes on a cruise ship, many of the victims describe a second blow, the response of the cruise line. Jamie Decker was only 12 years old when she says she endured the trauma of a rape. But she says security personnel didn't believe her story, that she had been taken and touched by a crew member.
They weren't after him. They had no interest in bringing any attention to the crew members.
They were investigating
Me.
But somehow the little girl was up to the challenge and led them back to the place she feared most.
They didn't even believe me until I took them back to the room where I had just been brutally raped. And so I took them to this room. I walked up and I was like, this is the porthole. I was like, this is the blue pulley.
Jamie says when security later brought men in for a lineup, she was intimidated while trying to make an identification.
The head of security said to me, whichever man you choose, you will ruin the rest of his life. It's like walking into a cop station and being somebody who did something wrong. That's how I felt.
So you didn't see him in the lineup?
If I had seen him or, either way, I wouldn't have said.
In fact, Jamie says she saw her attacker's name tag, but she was too terrified then to tell anyone, and still too haunted today.
7 years later, to this day, I know his name and I won't say his name.
Why?
I don't know where he is. And until I do, I can't give that out.
3 years would pass before Jamie revealed the rape to her parents. They reported it to the FBI and say in an effort to hold Carnival accountable, they filed a lawsuit. So what was the response from the cruise line?
Well, that it never happened.
Eventually, the Deckers settled, but refused to sign a confidentiality agreement that would prevent them from speaking out about what happened to Jamie. An account that this man says makes perfect sense. Is a sexual crime a risk when you're on board a cruise ship?
Oh, yes, definitely. You're being targeted the minute you come on board.
Targeted?
Yes.
By whom?
The crew and passengers.
And Randy Jack should know, a former police investigator who served in the military in Afghanistan. For 7 years, he helped supervise security on board with 4 major cruise lines. What types of crimes did you witness on a cruise ship?
Everything from grand larceny to sexual assault, sexual harassment. I've had to disarm crew members with fire axes. I've had to stop fights involving 5 and 6 passengers and was injured myself.
Jax is now director of security at a small Nevada casino, and he runs Maritime Investigations International. For the first time tonight on Primetime, he gives an insider's account of how crimes can get lost at sea. When you hear the cruise lines say, hey, we report everything and we do everything we're supposed to do, security is job number one, and our cruise ships are safer than any community in America, what do you think when you hear that?
It's bizarre. It's untrue. You can't imagine the abnormal things that happen out there on a weekly basis.
But cruise industry consultants painted a different picture last month before a congressional subcommittee.
When you buy a ticket for a cruise, you have a 4 in 1 million chance of being sexually assaulted. That's identical to the chance of being struck by lightning.
Cruise ships are remarkably safe. Out of the more than 31 million passengers carried over the past 3 years, passengers and crew, I should say, there were 178 total claimed sexual assaults, 24 missing persons, excluding the 5 who were rescued or found, and 4 robberies.
Those numbers are made by people that don't do what I do at sea. The reality about the numbers is that they're much higher than what it is that they're reporting.
And then there's the question of potential predators on board. Jamie says hers was no random attack. The crew member had a map of the ship with her cabin and other cabins circled. What's more troubling, he knew personal details that suggest he was stalking her.
We knew about my dog. He knew about my little sister's birthday coming up. He knew about my mom's middle name. I mean, just some crazy stuff that he just shouldn't know.
Jax is not surprised by this. He says for the vast majority, cruises are safe, but the ship can also be an ideal situation for criminals.
It's a predator's dream because, and we do have a lot of career criminals that come on board cruise ships to do nothing but prey upon other passengers.
This cruise ship youth director had a criminal record and then sexually abused a 12-year-old girl on board. Real estate agent Janet Kelly says a cruise ship bartender drugged her, dragged her to the bathroom, and raped her. And Deborah Schaefer's teenage daughter says she fell asleep in a friend's cabin, and then a 30-year-old passenger raped her. But according to Trade Association President Michael Cry, these cases are a tiny minority of passengers' experiences.
I think you're safer on board a ship than you are in virtually any community in this country.
Who does the reporting? Who says this many assaults, this many potential rapes? Who does that? The cruise line?
Well, I think it's reported incident by incident. Then we rely upon the federal agencies to actually collate statistics.
But Jack says during his own 7-year career as security officer, he personally dealt with more than 50 sex assault cases, some of which cruise line management never even reported to authorities. A passenger comes and says, I was raped. What's the first reaction of the cruise lines in your experience?
They do not want to acknowledge that this woman was actually raped. It's more or less, how do we make this go away with the least amount of attention to us as a cruise line, and to our ship, our vessel, and to the captain.
And once a crime occurs, he says the first call doesn't go to the FBI. It usually goes to the corporate office. But cruise line officials say they go by the book.
If there is some indication of foul play, that the evidence is preserved, the potential crime scene is secured, and officials are notified, that's the protocol.
That's the protocol.
That is what is followed.
Have you ever been in that type of situation where you knew something had happened, you knew it needed to be investigated, and instead you were pressured to, let's just keep this quiet?
Yes.
In your experience, were the crimes that happened on board all then communicated to the FBI?
No. Heavens no. That's just a throwdown. I write a report and it goes to the Home Office, but it's not like I'm sending it to the Chief of Police. I don't know where it goes.
So as the issue now gets congressional attention, advocates are calling for independent law enforcement on board. But victims like Jamie Decker are also looking for cruise lines to change their approach when tragedy strikes.
They were never on my side, and that's wrong.
Jamie says all they need to do is ask themselves a simple question.
What would they have done if it was their child?
We were lulled into believing that our children were safe. I know that you're not necessarily safe on a cruise. I mean, I know that now, but I didn't know it at the time.
Carnival Cruise Lines declined a request for an on-camera interview regarding Jamie Decker's allegations. In a letter, Carnival said that in light of the fact that no allegation of a sexual assault was ever made until a lawsuit was filed 3 years later, the company believes that the matter was fully investigated and properly handled. And as for Randy Jacks, Carnival says in the more than 10 years since he worked for them, they've revamped their security requirements and training procedures. But remember, he's also worked for 3 other major cruise lines since 2001. We'll be right back.